"What do you desire most?" he asked, his voice like the rustle of dry leaves. Chipo spoke first, her voice trembling with determination. "We want wealth, enough to lift our families out of poverty." The merchant smiled, revealing teeth that gleamed unnaturally white. "Riches come at a price." In the heart of a small African village, surrounded by dense forests and shimmering rivers, two inseparable friends, Chipo and Tendai, lived modestly but dreamt of a better life. Both were known for their beauty, Chipo, with her glowing skin and piercing eyes, and Tendai, with her radiant smile and graceful movements. They spent their days tending to chores, weaving baskets, and dreaming of wealth that would free them from the grind of village life. One stormy evening, the air in the village shifted. Thunder growled low in the distance as villagers rushed to their huts. Amid the chaos, a lone figure emerged on the horizon. Dressed in flowing black robes, the merchant walked with an unnatural gait. His arrival was accompanied by the chilling cries of crows circling above. His cart, pulled by two emaciated oxen, carried treasures that shimmered even in the dim light. The merchant's deep, melodic voice carried promises of untold riches. "Your desires can become reality," he said, fixing his unsettling gaze on the two friends. "But only those bold enough to seize their fate will find fortune." That night, as the village slept under a canopy of stars, Chipo and Tendai made their way to the merchant's tent, their hearts racing with a mixture of excitement and fear. Inside the tent, the air was thick with the scent of burning herbs. The merchant gestured for them to sit. His piercing eyes seemed to look straight into their souls. "What do you desire most?" he asked, his voice like the rustle of dry leaves. Chipo spoke first, her voice trembling with determination. "We want wealth, enough to lift our families out of poverty." The merchant smiled, revealing teeth that gleamed unnaturally white. "Riches come at a price." Tendai and Chipo, driven by their unyielding dreams, approached the merchant despite their fear. His voice was deep and cold, like the echo of a cave. "I can give you what your hearts desire," he said, his eyes glowing faintly red beneath the shadow of his hood. He held up two glimmering gold coins. "But wealth does not come cheap. Are you willing to pay the price?" The girls exchanged nervous glances, their hearts racing. "What is the price?" Tendai asked, her voice trembling. The merchant leaned closer, the scent of decay wafting from him. "Your innocence must be shed under the gaze of the river of shadows. There, your destiny will be sealed." Under a moonless sky, Tendai and Chipo followed the merchant. He led them through dense forests where the trees whispered in languages they couldn't understand. Shadows danced unnaturally around them, and the air grew colder with every step. When they finally arrived at the River of Shadows, it was unlike anything they'd imagined. The river was dark, its surface shimmering with an eerie silver glow. Strange, ghostly shapes flickered beneath the water, and a haunting melody seemed to rise from its depths. The merchant handed them each an obsidian blade. "You must offer your blood to the river," he commanded. "Let the water claim what binds you to this world." Tendai and Chipo knelt at the riverbank, their hands shaking as they held the blades. The merchant began chanting in an ancient tongue, his voice reverberating through the trees. As the words grew louder, the river's surface churned violently, and ghostly hands began to rise from the water, clawing at the air. With a shared look of determination, the girls made small cuts on their palms, letting their blood drip into the river. The moment the first drop hit the water, the earth trembled. A deafening roar filled the air as the river turned crimson, and the ghostly hands dragged themselves onto the shore. One of the apparitions, a woman with hollow eyes and flowing black hair, grabbed Tendai's wrist. Her voice was a whisper and a scream at once. "Do you understand the cost?" Chipo screamed as spectral snakes slithered out of the river, coiling around her legs. The merchant watched silently, his glowing eyes fixed on the scene. Before the girls could run, the river surged, pulling them both under. When Tendai and Chipo awoke, they were lying on the riverbank, drenched but unharmed. The merchant was gone, and the forest was eerily silent. In their hands, they each held a golden coin, its surface pulsating saintly as if alive. As they walked back to the village, strange things began to happen. Tendai noticed that her shadow no longer moved with her, instead flickering and shifting like it had a life of its own. Chipo's reflection in a nearby puddle grinned back at her, though her lips remained still. When the girls returned home, they found their huts transformed. Gold coins, jeweled necklaces, and silk fabrics filled the rooms. Their neighbors, awestruck by their sudden wealth, crowded around them with envy. But as the days passed, the shadows of their new lives grew darker. Tendai's shadow began whispering to her at night, its voice coaxing her to do things she didn't dare repeat. Chipo found herself drawn to the river, its haunting melody now a constant presence in her mind. At first, their newfound wealth brought joy. They dressed in the finest clothes, adorned themselves with jewelry, and became the envy of the village. But as the days passed, strange occurrences began to unfold. Chipo was the first to notice the shadows. At night, they seemed to move independently of their owners, stretching unnaturally long and curling around her feet. Tendai began to hear whispers, soft at first, then louder, echoing her darkest fears. One night, Chipo woke to find a shadowy figure looming over her bed. It had the merchant's glowing red eyes and skeletal frame. The debt must be paid, it hissed before disappearing into the dark. Desperate for answers, the girls sought the village Inanga, a powerful spiritual healer. The Inanga listened to their story with grave concern. "You have made a pact with Nyama Yenzura, the spirit of eternal hunger," she said. "He gives wealth but takes everything in return. You must return to the forest and break the pact before it consumes you." Determined to undo their mistake, Chipo and Tendai ventured into the forest at dusk, armed only with a talisman the Inanga had given them for protection. The forest was alive with eerie sounds, the rustling of unseen creatures, the distant howl of wind, and the occasional crack of branches. As they ventured deeper, the air grew colder, and the path became narrower. The shadows seemed to come alive, forming shapes that mocked and taunted them. Chipo clutched the talisman tightly, while Tendai struggled to suppress her fear. In a clearing, they saw visions of their families suffering without their wealth. A spirit appeared urging them to keep their gold. Tendai faltered, but Chipo reminded her of their purpose. They encountered the merchant. His form had changed, his body now twisted and monstrous, his eyes burning like embers. "You dare to defy me?" he roared, his voice shaking the trees. The girls stood their ground, holding up the talisman. Its glow intensified, casting a protective barrier around them. The merchant lunged, but the light repelled him, his form flickering like a dying flame. Guided by the talisman, Chipo and Tendai reached a glowing river of molten gold, the source of the merchant's power. The talisman's light grew brighter, and the river began to boil and churn. The merchant reappeared, his rage palpable. "You will never escape," he bellowed, summoning shadowy creatures to attack. In a moment of courage, Chipo stepped forward and hurled the talisman into the river. The ground shook violently, and the creatures disintegrated into smoke. The merchant let out an ear-piercing scream as his form dissolved into the boiling river. The forest grew still. The talisman's sacrifice had freed them. Chipo and Tendai emerged from the forest at dawn, their faces pale but determined. Though their wealth was gone, they felt a profound sense of relief. Back in the village, they dedicated their lives to helping others, sharing their story as a cautionary tale. They learned to find happiness not in material wealth but in the bonds of friendship and the strength of their community. And so, the legend of Chipo and Tendai became a tale told around fires, reminder of the dangers of greed and the power of redemption.